most satisfying experience in a Soul-like game is undoubtedly unlock a shortcut back to the bonfire right before a boss. This not only lets you upgrade yourself before the fight, but also reduce the frustration of repeated boss runbacks if you die. The second area in Lies of P, Krat Central Station Plaza, features exactly this design. Unlike the tutorial level, although it's about the same size, the combat frequency and mob density are dialed up significantly, serving as a transition from the tutorial to the main game. Here, I like to share my personal understanding of level design in Soul Lies. The mobs, allies, and bosses are all integral parts of the level design itself. Levels can be divided into combat section and routine sections. The routine sections serve the combat sections. They mainly have two purposes. 1. Guiding the player to the end of the level. 2. Providing the player with combat strategy and spatial awareness. The combat sections are very straightforward. It's about what enemies you fight. Different enemies have different combat traits, and the player makes their own decision to complete the encounter. Back to the main topic. First, let's anchor the objective of this level, the transition from the tutorial to the main game. This means to familiarize players with all the tutorial mechanics, get them used to more frequent and dangerous combat, help them understanding the difference between elite enemies and basic mobs, introduce the Stargazer and level up mechanics, teach them about furry attacks, introduce the merchant NPC system, and finally, have them take down the game's first real boss. Let's see how this level actually pulls all of this off. Right at the start, it introduced a core mechanics of the game, the Stargazer and the state leveling system. Placing this right after defeating the previous edit guarantee that the player have enough resources to actually level up. The starting area features a simple circular design, surrounded by lootable items and mobs. The difficulty is moderate, and it introduced a new enemy type, dogs. I actually feel this part is a bit messy, even though the enemy placement accounts for whether the player goes left or right, and there are items to grab. This kind of design would make more sense in a multi-branching scenario. However, right now, it's basically a one-way street. The circular path only has one actual exit. Plus, the scatter combination of enemies and obstacle feels a bit redundant. Once I realized these loops only have one axis, going left or right doesn't really make me want to turn back and clear the mobs on the other side. But because I have played other Soul-likes and know the importance of Ergo, I cleared out everything just to level up faster. The combat here features a mix of basic mobs and fast win-up dogs. The pacing is different from the multi-mobs fights in the tutorial level. The dogs had a huge impact on the combat rhythm, giving the player a lot of tactical space to decide how to handle scenarios with multi-dogs and basic mobs. Here, I triggered the sprint button and a sprinting tutorial pop up. Honestly, this could have easily been taught in the tutorial level. Then, we run into the first fork in the road. Up top is a classic 3 mob fight, where one is active and the other 2 slowly grow up. This kind of encounter serves to shift the pacing and let you farm some ergo, but it doesn't serve much other purpose, making this side path feel a bit abrupt. However, it does give the player a choice, as these simple fights aren't mandatory. Next, we hit another branching path. The warm lighting down below subtly indicates the main path. If we check out the other roads, there's a basic mob placed at the end, signaling that it is indeed a traversable path. We find a shortcut, reinforcing the concept of shortcut doors. This temporarily block-off side path connects straight back to the main road. A very classic design. There are 2 similar setups in this level. Typically, this design places a high damage range enemy on the high ground, while putting a basic mob combo down below. If the player takes the lower path, they face a high difficulty fight. But if they take the upper side path and clear their way down, the fight becomes much easier. This is a design choice that offers multiple combat strategies. Next up, the ringing phone adds some lore, placing natural, non-mandatory environmental interactions like this in the level, not only fleshing out the story, but also it enhances immersion. The game specifically uses this alleyway to teach another core mechanic, furry attacks. However, the death penalty here is pretty steep, as you have to run all the way back from the plaza. Having a shortcut here will probably be much better. Then, there's another bug. This side path is very short and has a clear purpose, emphasizing our ultimate destination of this trip, Hotel Krat. Back on the main path, basic mobs are used to guide the player toward the end of this level. Here we pick up a throwing item, but honestly, unless it's a forced tutorial, I rarely use consumables in this kind of games. For one, I just feel like running up and slashing is more direct, and secondly, I suffer from game poverty anxiety and can't bear to waste consumables. If there were a scenario that forced me to personally experience the massive benefit of this item, I'd probably be way more likely to use it. I wonder if anyone else is like me. Here the second vertical design side path, even though it's technically a tutorial for drop-down fatal attacks, is really not that obvious. The final side path let us grab an item for repairing weapons. I feel like the purpose of this branching path is just to lead you to the item. It's also a way to teach player. Side paths usually hide good stuff. It's just that these particular branches are pretty simplistic and lack depth. Finally, right before heading to the boss room, we open a shortcut. Although it's a bit of distance from the Stargazer, you can just sprint straight there, so it feels like a fairly natural design. However, maybe during late stage playtesting, they feel the run back was too long, because they ultimately put a Stargazer right outside the boss door anyway. This actually makes the shortcut feel a bit redundant. What a pity. We meet our first merchant NPC right outside the boss room, which introduces another mechanic, buying items. You can also swap your starting weapon here. But at this point, players already know that Ergo can be used to permanently upgrade states. So in the early game, players are basically too reluctant to spend it on weapons. Honestly, for this kind of early game design, they should probably just give you the basic weapons for free. Here we encounter the first boss, and the difficulty isn't too high. It consolidates the various combat mechanics taught earlier. The boss attack frequency isn't particularly high, but it does have a phase 2, where it gets highly aggressive, attacks much faster, and completely shifts the combat rhythm. Defeating the boss rewards you with a cross, which hints at another core mechanic of the game that will be explained later at Hotel Krat. Next up, per our usual routine, let's first recreate the original scenes in the blockout. Yo, it's finally time for my own custom redesign. This time, I create two versions. The first version simply tweaked things that would optimize my own gameplay experience. One is removing the redundant side path, and the other is adding a shortcut near the alley enemy where you practice dealing with furry attacks. This way, the whole circular plaza doesn't feel like such a slog. The right side becomes the main path, and the left side becomes the shortcut, giving the circular design much more meaning. For the second version, I took inspiration from the tutorial level. Building on the previous version, I let players see the boss door right at the start. Even though it's blocked, the player goes through a process of spiraling down and then back up to unlock the shortcut, and then fight the boss. This places the boss shortcut close enough to the spawn point, making the shortcut highly meaningful and avoiding excessively long boss run or redundant teleport points. Which version do you guys prefer? Feel free to leave a comment below. After doing these two redesigns, I realized that the way a level's routine is presented doesn't actually impact the overall gameplay experience that massively. As long as the core combat mechanics are solid, there is a huge amount of freedom in how to place the mob. Players will just get immersed in a high-risk combat and the vibe of navigating a city full of dangers. Alright then, see you all in the next episode.